There was a library in a quiet town. The library was very old but not interesting. It had gray carpets, beige walls, and rows of books that almost never moved. Every morning at 8:30, the library opened. The first person to arrive each day was a man named Arthur. Arthur was not a librarian. He was simply someone who liked to be early for no particular reason. Arthur walked into the library at the same slow pace every morning. He walked past the front desk. He nodded at the librarian, whose name was Martha. Martha always nodded back. They never said anything because neither of them had anything new to say. Arthur always went to the same table. It was a wooden table near a window that looked out at a parking lot. The parking lot never had more than 4 cars in it. Arthur sat down. He placed his hands on the table. He looked at the surface for a few moments. The table had a small scratch on it. Arthur had observed this scratch every day for the past 5 years. He did not think anything about it. He just looked at it. Then he looked away. Arthur opened a book. The book was about different kinds of paper. Not colored paper or fancy paper. Just regular paper. Thin paper, thick paper, paper used for letters, paper used for notes. The book described each type of paper in slow, plain language. Arthur read the same chapter he always read. The chapter was about how paper absorbs ink. Arthur read one paragraph. Then he read it again. Then he read it a third time. He placed the book down. Martha, at the front desk, was sorting cards. The cards were identical. They were blank. She sorted them by how crisp the edges felt. She lifted a card. She pressed the edge with her finger. She placed the card in a pile. She repeated the same motion for each of the cards. She did this every day. She never changed her method. At 10:15, the library became silent again, even though it was already silent. The clock on the wall ticked very quietly. Arthur looked at the clock. The minute hand moved slightly. He waited for it to move again. It did. He continued watching it for 1 whole minute. A man named Felix entered the library. Felix did not read books. He came to check the bulletin board. The bulletin board never changed. It had one flyer about a gardening club that ended 3 years ago. Felix looked at the flyer. He nodded. He left the library. Back at the table, Arthur decided to stand up. He walked to the nonfiction section. He scanned the shelves without choosing anything. He walked down one aisle. Then he turned around and walked back. He continued walking slowly until he returned to the table. He sat down again. At noon, Martha stood up from her chair. She walked to a cabinet. She opened it. Inside was a container with crackers. She took one cracker out. She ate it. She put the container back in the cabinet. She sat down again. She did this every day. Arthur decided to stretch his legs again. He walked to the window. He looked at the parking lot. There were still 3 cars. One of them had dust on the windshield. Arthur looked at the dust. Then he looked at the sky. The sky was pale and had no clouds. He looked at the sky for 2 minutes. Nothing changed. In the afternoon, an older woman walked into the library. Her name was Helen. She went straight to the magazine section. She picked up a magazine about home storage solutions. She flipped through the pages but did not read anything. She placed the magazine back on the shelf. Then she left the library without saying a word. Martha took out the blank cards again. She resorted them. Arthur opened the book about paper again. He reread the same chapter. The clock ticked. The air was still. Nothing happened for a long time. At 4 o'clock, Arthur closed his book. He stood up. He walked to the door. He nodded at Martha. Martha nodded back. Arthur left the library. Martha continued sorting the blank cards until closing time. Then she turned off the lights. The library became dark. Everything remained still and silent. The next day, the library planned to open again. The end.